On this week's special update episode, we will be digging into breaking news surrounding the 2017 disappearance of Robert Baron from his pizzeria, Gigarelli's, in Old Forge, Pennsylvania. Just days ago, new searches were launched, and for the first time since the investigation began, it appears as though detectives may have finally found what they've been looking for. In addition to the Robert Baron case, we'll discuss some details related to the murder trial in the case of Danielle Stislicki. Floyd Galloway Jr. was arrested and charged with murder following the discovery of new evidence by investigators. However, the method by which that evidence was found has been challenged in court, and a judge has ruled to suppress it as inadmissible. This is Trace Evidence, Episode 217, Case Updates, Robert Baron and Danielle Stislicki. Welcome to Trace Evidence. I'm your host, Stephen Pacheco. Today in this special update episode, we'll examine two cases previously covered which have seen updates occurring in the last few months. Initially, I had planned to release an episode with a new case this week, but given the breaking news in the Robert Baron case, I decided to shuffle up the schedule and move that case to next week. Before getting into these case updates, just a few quick notes about the show. Trace Evidence is a weekly true crime podcast focused on unsolved murders and disappearances. Visit trace-evidence.com for all social media links, episode breakdowns, donation options, and contact information. You can submit case suggestions through the website or by emailing me directly at traceevidencepod@gmail.com. As a final note, this year, CrimeCon will be taking place in Orlando, Florida from September 22nd through the 24th. I'll be there representing Trace Evidence on Podcast Row, and I hope to see you too. Visit crimecon.com and use promo code TRACE to save 10% on your pass. That's crimecon.com, promo code TRACE. We'll now move into our case updates, beginning with episode 210, The Disappearance of Robert Baron. In late January of 2017, 58-year-old Robert Baron mysteriously vanished from Old Forge, Pennsylvania. Robert and his wife, Maria, were parents to 3 children, 2 daughters and 1 son, Robert Jr. Robert was, at the time, the owner and operator of Gigarelli's, a renowned pizza parlor located at 511 South Main Street. Robert Jr., often referred to as Bobby, worked alongside his father and lived in an apartment a short walk away. On the evening of Wednesday, January 25th, Robert and Bobby were closing up shop for the night. When they finished, Robert drove his son home to his apartment on Sussex Street, 0.7 of a mile north. Dropping him off at approximately 11 p.m., Robert apparently told Bobby that he would pick him up for work the next morning, but this would be the last time Bobby ever saw his father. Robert never returned home that night, although, according to Maria, this wasn't necessarily out of the ordinary. Robert maintained an apartment above the pizzeria so he could stay there when early deliveries were coming the next morning. So when Robert didn't come home that night, this was not seen as a reason for concern. That didn't become clear until the following morning, when after Robert failed to pick him up, Bobby walked over to the shop and found the morning delivery sitting outside and no indications that his father was there. He then called his mother, who rushed to the scene where they'd find several items out of place, including Robert's cell phone, which had been left in the kitchen, something he normally would never have done. Upon arriving, Maria rushed up the stairs to check the apartment. While she didn't find anything that stood out as not belonging there, she did note several items were missing. These included the comforter from a bed and a black rolling suitcase. Back downstairs, an Afghan from the upstairs apartment was found in the bar area. Again, a bizarre detail that didn't make sense to Robert's family. As police were notified, countless officers arrived to go through the restaurant and the apartment upstairs in search of evidence. They would later that day put out a notice to be on the lookout for Robert's car, a 2006 silver Hyundai Elantra. The vehicle, normally parked near to the pizzeria, was also missing. Over the course of the next 2 days, investigators searched through and pulled multiple bags of evidence from both the pizzeria and apartment. They quickly discovered evidence of what they described as an attempt to clean up the evidence of a crime. Several bottles of cleaners were out of place in the restaurant, and there were broken pieces of glass scattered on the floor. Several spots of blood were detected, and so detectives began spraying luminol. Enough blood evidence was discovered to suggest that had Robert been the victim of a violent crime, he may have been fatally wounded. In addition to the blood on the floor, traces of blood were recovered from the Afghan, and a single human tooth was found in a utility sink. On the morning of Sunday, January 29th, Robert's car was located in the 100 block of Howard Street, approximately 0.7 of a mile south from the restaurant. While the vehicle was unable to provide much assistance, it did raise many questions. Most notably, law enforcement stated that the vehicle was recovered in an area which had previously been searched, raising questions as to whether or not the suspect or suspects may have dumped the vehicle after the search had already begun. A forensic examination of the car would later reveal excessive mud on all 4 tires and the undercarriage, as well as locations of blood found in and outside of the car, on a passenger side front door, on the door frame near the front passenger seat, and on a piece of newspaper on the floor in the front seat. There was also a small amount of blood found on the exterior of the rear driver's side door handle. This evidence, along with scrapings of the mud and evidence taken from the restaurant, were sent off for testing. After discovery of the vehicle, law enforcement began searching in areas near to where it had been found. Much of the area searched followed the flow of the Lackawanna River, where at the time it was speculated that Robert's remains may have been dumped. Many other searches would be conducted surrounding the time of Robert's disappearance and in the 6 years which have passed. None of them seem to have shown any helpful results. In March, 2 months after his disappearance, forensic testing confirmed that the tooth and blood found in the restaurant did belong to Robert. At the time, law enforcement would not reveal what testing had told them about other evidence. In January of 2021, 4 years after Robert's disappearance, several snippets of surveillance video was released for the first time. Obtained from businesses in the area near Gigerelli's, 2 unknown figures can be seen. One clip shows a man in shorts walking near Main Street just after midnight on January 26th, approximately 8 hours prior to Robert being reported missing. According to the family, the man seen in this footage closely matches up with a witness statement describing a man seen outside of Gigerelli's less than an hour earlier at approximately 11 p.m., when Robert was dropping off Bobby. This man is identifiable in the video, however, WNEP 16 News blurred his face when showing the clip. The second video shows a man holding a lit cigarette and pulling a dark-colored, rolling suitcase behind him. At this same time, the man seen in the first video is seen again, walking back from the direction he had originally been heading. According to the family, the suitcase seen in the video closely resembles the piece of luggage noted as being missing from the apartment above Gigerelli's. The fight to bring Robert home and to find new evidence which can assist investigators has never stopped. While 6 long years have passed since Robert was last seen, new movement suggests that the answers may be much closer than anyone had previously imagined. Case update. Human remains have been recovered by investigators conducting a search in connection to the disappearance of Robert Baron. On Tuesday, March 28, 2023, Old Forge police were joined by county and state investigators, as well as agents out of the FBI's Scranton office and members of the New York State Police who brought with them specially trained dogs to aid in the search. On Wednesday, March 29th, all searchers returned and were this time joined by the county coroner as well as an anthropology team from Mercyhurst University in Erie. The search focused in on an area known as Connell's Patch, approximately 1 mile southwest from the restaurant, and it is notable for its close proximity to Pagnotti Park, which it butts up against. This is an area which had previously been the subject of different searches for Robert. According to local reports, police vehicles blocked off all entry to the park and surrounding areas, with the only traffic being the arrival and departure of different law enforcement vehicles. On Tuesday, March 28th, multiple Lackawanna County agencies posted messages on their Facebook pages. Their notice read in part, quote, "As many are aware by now, there is significant law enforcement activity ongoing in the Connell's Patch section of Old Forge related to the active investigation into the suspicious disappearance of Robert Baron Sr. 6 years ago." End quote. At the bottom of this message, law enforcement renewed their request for assistance from the public by posting the following questions. Quote, "Please think back to January of 2017 and consider the following. Did you notice anyone who had unexplained injuries or a person's sudden departure from the area? Did you interact with anyone who seemed intensely interested in the case, or maybe someone who made significant efforts to avoid talking about it? Did you observe anyone who seemed to have an abrupt change in mood, lifestyle, or appearance around this time? Are you aware of someone who suddenly came into an unexplained source of money? If there is anything else that sticks out in your memory during that time period, please contact us." End quote. When reached by the media, members of Robert's family confirmed that they had not become aware of the search nor the recovery of any remains in advance, stating that they were learning in real time like everyone else. They issued a statement which reads, quote, "We would like to thank the Pennsylvania State Police, especially Trooper Greg Allen, Scranton FBI, New York State Police and their search dogs and teams, Lackawanna County personnel, and everyone else who has worked and is working to bring Bob home. We feel like something positive has to come from all this hard work. We have our fingers crossed." End quote. On Wednesday, March 30th, District Attorney Mark Powell issued a statement on the search and confirmed the recovery of human remains. He stated, quote, "While we are hopeful that they are the remains of Robert Baron Sr., we will have to await DNA testing to confirm the identity. I have spoken with the Barron family and remain hopeful that we can provide them with the closure they deserve. Additionally, people may be hesitant to share information due to close relationships with others who could have been involved. They may be concerned for their own safety or reputation, or they may have been unknowingly brought into a situation by the person or persons responsible. Relationships and loyalties can change, as do people and their perspectives. No matter the circumstances, it is not too late to come forward and help give Robert's family and friends the answers they deserve." End quote. District Attorney Powell stated that the human remains were recovered from the site of an old strip mine in the Connell's Patch section of Old Forge. However, law enforcement are optimistic even in advance of DNA analysis that this will be Robert and they will finally be able to move forward with their investigation. If you recall from previous coverage, while much evidence seemed to exist and pointed towards two potential suspects, earlier calls for the filing of charges were met with resistance from the DA's office as they wanted a body to be recovered before moving forward. Should these remains prove to be those of Robert Baron, then there's a chance we're going to see some charges coming sooner than later. While that remains speculative, it is what the family and members of law enforcement are hoping for. Still, they need more help from people who may have information about this case. Whether or not it seems important to you, you never know what information might help break this case open. On March 30th, the Lackawanna County District Attorney's Office posted a message on their Facebook page discussing the developments and, once again, asking for assistance. It reads in part, quote, "Yesterday, our investigators discovered human remains in the Connell's Patch section of Old Forge. While we are hopeful that they are the remains of Robert Baron Sr., we will have to await DNA testing to confirm the identity. The search will continue for as long as it takes to make sure we have left no stone unturned. I want to thank the FBI, Pennsylvania State Police, New York State Police, and their team of cadaver dogs, county detectives, the Old Forge Police Department, and the Pennsylvania Game Commission for their hard work and enthusiasm in our ongoing efforts to solve this case. I also want to thank members of the community for coming forward with tips that helped us move the investigation forward. Again, we are asking everyone, if you have any information that might be helpful, even if you think it is an insignificant piece, please come forward. We have a designated hotline at 570-963-6311 and a designated email address at lackawanna@lackawannacounty.org for you to share information which can be done anonymously. End quote. 6 years have passed since Robert Baron was last seen alive. Despite exhaustive efforts by his friends, family, and members of law enforcement, the case has grown stagnant. However, with the recovery of human remains announced, pending the determination of a DNA test, there's a good chance that Robert's case is growing a lot warmer. Law enforcement is convinced people in the local area possess knowledge that could bring this case to a close and help assuage the grief of a family which has suffered without answers for years. Someone out there knows more than they are saying, but it also seems apparent that someone is talking. Something led law enforcement back to that area to search, something drove them towards that strip mine. It's far better to tell what you know now, rather than having to explain why you kept your mouth shut later. It's a pretty easy choice. Keep silent to defend a killer or killers, or call in an anonymous tip, take the weight off your conscience, and help bring justice to a family and community that desperately needs it. Breaking news. Less than 24 hours after the release of this update, the Lackawanna County District Attorney's Office has announced that the remains found in the Connells Patch area of Old Forge are in fact those of Robert Baron Sr. In addition to this identification, investigators have arrested Justin Schuback and charged him with Robert's murder. District Attorney Powell described the crime as a robbery gone wrong. I'm now going to play some of the press conference from earlier today so that you can hear this information firsthand.
Today we arrested Justin Schuback for the murder of Robert Baron Sr. that occurred back in 2017. Following an arraignment, the defendant will be placed in the Lackawanna County Prison and held without bail. The Barron family has waited a long time for justice to occur, and no one in law enforcement is going to say or do anything to jeopardize the successful prosecution of this case. We sincerely hope that today is a day that the Barron family can begin to start to move forward and find some relief and closure. I also want to commend the spectacular efforts of the investigative team that has been nothing short of inspiring. What I observed over the last few days was truly amazing. I want to give a special shout out to the FBI CAST unit, who provided a significant break recently in allowing us to break this case. The New York State Police and their cadaver dogs for actually finding Robert's remains 6 years after he was left in the woods. Certainly having a body helps, and that was a critical component, but it's also the location of the body that helps circumstantially establish that Mr. Schuback is the one and only responsible person for this murder. Mr. Schuback was friendly with Bobby Barron Jr., and there are facts laid out in the affidavit of probable cause to explain their relationship. But we will continue to investigate and determine if other arrests are warranted.
So there you have it. An arrest has been made of one Justin Schuback. Over the course of the next few weeks, there will be more developments in this case as we learn more about the probable cause which led to this arrest and the case that has been built against him. As always, I'll keep you updated to the best of my ability, and whenever this case evolves, there will be an update episode to discuss the legal maneuvering and how the trial is going to be. Update number 2, episode 37, The Disappearance of Danielle Stislicki. Danielle Ann Stislicki was born on February 28th, 1988 to parents Ann and Richard. She would be raised in the town of Redford, Michigan, a western suburb of Detroit. Danielle was described by friends and family as a welcoming, loving, beautiful young woman with a big heart. She was charismatic, caring, kind, and her bright personality helped build a tight circle of friends who would stick close to her throughout her life. In her later years, Danielle began working in insurance through MetLife in Southfield, where her mother was also employed. On Friday, December 2nd, 2016, the 28-year-old had a busy day lined up at work. She also had a busy weekend coming up, with a planned visit to her grandparents on that Sunday. Wanting to see her best friend Sarah, Danielle reached out and the two made plans to get together for dinner that night after Danielle got off. Unfortunately, she'd never arrived for dinner, and by the next day, a desperate search was underway to locate the missing woman. Last witnesses reported seeing Danielle exiting the MetLife building, located in the 25,000 block of Telegraph Road, that Friday evening. She was spotted climbing into her black 2015 Jeep Renegade and driving off in the direction of her apartment, located near Halstead Road and Grand River Avenue in Farmington Hills, approximately 12 miles away. Danielle missed her dinner date, scheduled for 6 p.m., and when Sarah tried to reach her, the phone rang, but no one answered. At the time, Sarah was uncertain that there was reason for concern, as Danielle had to work the next day, and she thought perhaps she'd gone home and simply fallen asleep. However, when she didn't hear back from Danielle by the next morning, she got in her car and drove to the apartment complex. There she found the Jeep parked in its normal space, no more than 8 feet from the apartment door. After banging on the door, screaming, honking her horn, and throwing pebbles at the windows, she finally called Danielle's mother, Anne, to report her concerns. Anne and Richard used their key to gain entry to the apartment and immediately realized something was wrong. Despite the Jeep being parked out front, there were no indications that Danielle had been inside the apartment the night before. Her parents noted only 2 items missing: Danielle's car keys and her cell phone. Deeply troubled, they notified police, who quickly came and began going through the apartment. While no signs of a crime were found inside, they did locate Danielle's purse, identification, and wallet in her Jeep. For reasons unknown at that time, they began speculating that it may not have been Danielle who parked the Jeep in that spot. At a loss for solid evidence, investigators spoke with several witnesses who had seen Danielle or who had been in or near the MetLife building the night of her disappearance. Several witnesses reported seeing a vehicle with its hood up as though the driver was having car trouble. That driver was then seen speaking to Danielle, and authorities were able to positively identify him as Floyd Galloway Jr., a security guard at the building who, according to Anne, was known to have a crush on Danielle. Danielle wasn't interested to begin with, but really lost interest when she learned Galloway was not only married, but that his wife was dying of a terminal illness. At this time, investigators attempt to question Galloway, but he quickly hired a lawyer and wouldn't answer questions under the advice of legal counsel. With little more than witnesses who could confirm Galloway talked to Danielle that night, investigators began putting out flyers, which showed Danielle, her cell phone, jacket, and a keychain charm, which were all missing. The flyers also showed her Jeep Renegade in hopes that someone may have seen it in the hours leading up to her disappearance. By December 19th, law enforcement made statements that all evidence they had acquired was now leading them to the belief that Danielle had been the victim of a crime. Less than a week later, investigators arrived at the home of Floyd Galloway, where they removed several pieces of evidence for testing, including but not limited to a swatch of carpet and a mattress. Elizabeth Newton, Galloway's sister-in-law, told the media around this time that investigators had told her that witnesses had seen Danielle entering Galloway's home and that her Jeep had been parked outside. She also noted that sections of floor and floorboards were removed from both the house and Galloway's vehicle. While investigators were looking at Galloway to potentially be connected to Danielle's case, they'd end up finding him tied to a different crime. On June 27, 2017, Galloway was arrested by Livonia police on suspicion of sexual assault related to an attack in Hines Park in September of 2016, just 3 months before Danielle went missing. A female jogger running through the park was attacked and managed to break free, running for help. Following his arrest, another local police department stated that they too were looking at Galloway in relation to another unsolved sexual assault. It was at this time that the Farmington Hills police announced for the first time that Galloway was a person of interest in Danielle's case. While details were not revealed at that time, investigators noted that DNA evidence conclusively linked Galloway to Danielle. 5 months later, on November 21st, Galloway took a plea deal. In exchange for pleading guilty to kidnapping, criminal sexual conduct, and assault to do great bodily harm by strangulation, the charge of assault with intent to commit murder was dropped. On December 8th, 1 year and 6 days since Danielle vanished, Galloway was sentenced to 16 to 35 years for his attack on the Hines Park jogger. Following his conviction, investigators elevated his status from person of interest to suspect in Danielle's case. Galloway was later officially charged with first-degree murder, a felony which carries a life sentence. He has pleaded not guilty. Michigan Assistant Attorney General Jamie Horowitz is prosecuting the case and has stated that they have an abundance of evidence, including witness statements, GPS from Danielle's phone showing her at Galloway's house, and DNA evidence from the carpet in his home and his van. Judge James Brad agreed and directed the case to circuit court. In a preliminary hearing, Sarah, Danielle's mother Ann, and 2 of her co-workers testified. One co-worker explained that she had seen Galloway with the hood of his car up, apparently experiencing car trouble, and Danielle was walking towards him. Another co-worker testified that he saw Danielle drive out of the parking garage with Galloway in her passenger seat. A detective who originally questioned Galloway testified, quote, "His demeanor was kind of standoffish. He wouldn't look at us, kind of stared off at the wall when we were talking to him. His hands were shaking." End quote. Police revealed that they had recovered Danielle's car keys and Fitbit near an M5 entrance ramp between Danielle's apartment and a Tim Hortons restaurant, where Galloway was caught on surveillance footage at 8:38 p.m. the night Danielle disappeared. Footage also showed Galloway using the store's phone, then being picked up by a cab. The cab driver stated that he dropped Galloway off at an apartment complex directly across from the parking garage Danielle had allegedly driven him out of earlier that night. Police believe Galloway got a ride from Danielle after feigning car trouble. She brought him to his house where the crime took place. He then drove her Jeep back to her apartment, walked from the apartment to Tim Hortons, and took a cab back to pick up his car. A Michigan State forensic biologist testified that touch DNA connected to Danielle was found on carpet taken from the Galloway home. The forensic examiner said that based on the lack of blood, he believed the cause of death was likely strangulation. It was decided that there was enough evidence to move forward with a trial. Despite all of the evidence, Galloway maintains his innocence and has disregarded pleas from the family for the location of Danielle's remains. Experts believe Galloway will not reveal the location of her remains during the trial, and even if convicted, will likely not give up that information unless there is something in it for him. Case update. While the prosecution against Floyd Galloway was optimistic about their chances of obtaining a conviction, a new ruling by the trial judge has thrown their case into disarray. A judge, after examining all of the information available, has decided to disallow key evidence from being presented at trial due to the manner in which it was obtained. This ruling was made on November 17, 2022. The decision to suppress this evidence revolved around claims from the defense that Galloway's attorney-client privilege had been violated, leading to the discovery of evidence by investigators that they could not have obtained by any other method. At some point after he was named a person of interest, Galloway's lawyer advised his client to sit down for a polygraph examination, which would be carried out by the defense using an examiner selected by the defense. This polygraph was not done by law enforcement, nor were law enforcement involved in the process. The test was administered by James Hope, a former FBI agent who has a lot of experience working with lie detector tests. According to records made available, following this polygraph test, James Hope picked up the phone and placed a call to a good friend of his, Gary Mayer, then chief of police in Troy. According to reports, James Hope informed Chief Mayer that he was deeply disturbed by certain things Galloway said during the polygraph, and he wanted to provide that information to law enforcement. Upon obtaining this information, Chief Mayer then provided it to Chuck Nebu, chief of the Farmington Hills Police Department. Danielle Russo Bennett, a prosecutor working the case, explained to the judge, saying, quote, Chief Nebus typed up a standard form tip sheet they use in all these cases. These officers then go out to a location and recover property belonging to Miss Staslicki, end quote. As a result of this tip, which came from the polygraph test, investigators managed to track down and obtain multiple witness statements and key pieces of evidence. Acting on this information, detectives recovered Danielle's cell phone, Fitbit, and car keys in an area between her apartment and a local Tim Hortons restaurant. They also found witnesses who confirmed seeing Galloway at the Tim Hortons the night of her disappearance. The restaurant, described as being no more than a 10-minute walk from Danielle's apartment, told investigators that Galloway purchased a coffee and used their payphone the night of Danielle's disappearance. A taxi driver later confirmed that at approximately 9 p.m., he picked up Galloway from the parking lot of the local Tim Hortons and took him to his destination, an apartment complex less than 1,000 feet from the spot where Danielle was last seen alive. Police have obtained statements from both witnesses who had seen Galloway at Tim Hortons as well as getting into the cab. In addition to this, they requested and were given surveillance footage and phone records from that night. Investigators also obtained forensic data from Danielle's cell phone, evidence of the cab ride, and surveillance footage from a gas station near the Tim Hortons. While all of this evidence helped break the case open for detectives, it appears that they were only able to find it through what the judge has determined was a flagrant violation of Galloway's civil rights, and as a result, none of that evidence is allowed to be presented. In a blistering statement made by Judge McMillan, she explained, quote, Police intentionally intruded on the privileged relationship and used the information to locate and seize evidence. The court finds the actions of the government were outrageous, end quote. As a result of this ruling, none of the evidence from Danielle's cell phone is admissible. None of the surveillance footage is admissible. No evidence of the cab ride is admissible. None of the witness sightings are admissible. None of the phone records are admissible. This is obviously a strong blow to the case prosecutors were presenting, especially when it's taken into consideration that despite countless searches over the last 7 years, Danielle's remains have never been found. Extensive searches were conducted in the area of Hines Park, where Galloway attacked a jogger previously. However, nothing has turned up. For his part, Galloway maintains his innocence in this case. Another ruling made by the judge has further complicated the prosecution's case. On February 5th, 2021, a judge ruled that the prosecution will not be allowed to introduce information at trial which discusses Galloway's attack on the jogger nor his guilty plea. According to the judge, this information was brought up by the prosecution in an attempt to show a pattern of violent and sexually motivated behavior by Galloway. However, the judge determined that because there were no striking similarities between the Hines Park attack and Danielle's disappearance, none of the information about his arrest, crime, plea, or sentence will be allowed. Asked for their thoughts on the ruling, Ann Richards expressed the family's frustration and disappointment, telling Local 4 News Detroit, quote, Our family is disappointed on these results and will continue to support the judicial appeal process and effort for the true story to be told. The public should also be aware that Floyd is currently in prison for sexually attacking a jogger that was fortunate to escape just 3 months before Danielle went missing. End quote. According to recent news reports, the prosecution is attempting to appeal the decision made by the judge, which ruled out some of their most powerful evidence. Pending the results of those attempts, the trial will be moving forward regardless, and we can only hope that, if indeed Galloway is the one responsible for Danielle's disappearance and likely murder, that there will be enough evidence to prove it to a jury. It is exceedingly important for law enforcement to receive any information which can assist them in this investigation. The more they have, the greater the chances of seeing justice served. If you know anything, even the smallest detail, please contact investigators and let them know. Danielle's family has suffered for so many years not knowing their daughter's fate, not being able to lay her to rest, and now they have to watch as the man they believe was responsible might walk. This concludes the updates for this week. One positive: movement and progress in the investigation into the disappearance of Robert Baron. One negative: the loss of admissibility for key evidence in the prosecution of Floyd Galloway Jr. for the murder of Danielle Stislicki, sadly thrown out by the judge due to investigators' violations of Galloway's attorney-client privilege. While it's a difficult decision, it is legally the right decision. As always, I will keep you updated to the best of my ability as these investigations continue, and hopefully we'll see some good news. Special shout out to everyone who's been messaging me this week about the updates in Robert's case. I love how involved and active all of you are with trying to keep these stories fresh in the news. If you have any information about the disappearance of Robert Baron, please use their special hotline at 570-963-6311. Or you can send an email to lackawanna@lackawannacounty.org. All tips can be given anonymously. If you have any information about the disappearance of Danielle Stislicki, the crimes of Floyd Galloway, or anything which might be of assistance, please contact the Farmington Hills Police Department at 248-871-2610. You can also call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-SPEAK-UP. That's 1-800-773-2587. What do you believe happened? Tweet me at TraceEvPod, email me at traceevidencepod@gmail.com, or comment in the Facebook group. At this time, I'd like to take a moment to thank our amazing Patreon producers: Alicia Lorraine, Andrew Guarino, Ann Bertram, Camelia Tyler, Christine Greco, Danny Renee, Daerthy, Denise Dingsdale, Diane Dyson, Eloanne Meyer, Fabulous TT, Guillerme Pinto, Jennifer Winkler, Julie A. Mangano, Justin Snyder, Kara Moreland, K.Y., Lars Jensen Fengel, Leslie B., Madison LaHoulier, Marla Wright, Melissa Breckeisen, Nick Mohar Shures, Sarah Lyons, Travis Skepko, Stacy Finnegan, Stephanie Joyner, Stephanie Eve, Tiffany Nelson, and Tom Radford. Without your amazing support, this show would not be possible, so thank you all so much for contributing to Trace Evidence. One quick reminder, if you're planning on attending CrimeCon this year in Orlando, Florida, use promo code TRACE at crimecon.com to save 10% off your pass. Once again, that's promo code TRACE at crimecon.com. If you're interested in learning more about this case or other cases featured on the show, please visit trace-evidence.com. There you can find case breakdowns, all social media links, merchandise shops, case descriptions, media, and options for donating, including PayPal and Patreon, should you wish to support the show. I want to thank you all again for listening to these updates, and hopefully, at least in the case of Robert Baron, things are taking a turn and we may finally see some answers. Hopefully, in the Danielle Stislicki case, the prosecutors will still be able to move forward and have evidence which can afford them the ability to officially see Floyd Galloway Jr. sentenced for the murder of Danielle Stislicki. So thank you all again for listening, and I hope you'll join me next week, where I have a brand new case that I was originally going to release this week. So Thank you all again, and I hope you'll join me next week for another unsolved case on the next episode of Trace Evidence.